thick now.
Yes, this is Jonathan Gray
there,
from New
John?
Zealand. How are you?
Pretty good. I really apologize. That happens very once in a blue moon. I think I got some little updates I got to do on my computer, and to the listeners, I apologize. With Jonathan Gray on the line, go to b4ups.com. He has many books. And how about you go and tell us about yourself and what got you interested in ancient past and ancient origins, and also your archaeological background?
Well, I suppose it all began, Mike, when I was about 10 years of age, and I picked up a magazine, a popular magazine, which told the story of the British explorer Percy Fawcett, who'd gone into the South American Amazon jungle, and while there he had discovered the remains of a dead city choked with vines and trees, and in its vicinity there were little fellows with blowpipes and poison darts that kept strangers away. Well, he went up back to Britain and tried to interest the British Geographical Society without much success. So then he and his son went back down there, and they actually vanished. They were never heard of again. And so my first expedition went into an area very close to that, and that's how I got excited about the whole thing, was to get into a lost city area where no man had been for thousands of years, so to speak.
And I can tell that you have, what kind of accent do you have, Jonathan?
Say that again, please, Mike. I didn't quite catch the sound.
What kind of accent do you have? Like, are you originally from New Zealand or from somewhere else?
Well, actually, I spent most of my life in Australia, but my wife and I moved across to New Zealand just a few years back to make this our base. From here, we do everything.
Are y'all having any type of earthquakes or any problems over there with the way the world is acting right now?
Well, when we left Australia, they told us you're leaving the land of snakes to go to the land of shakes. But we're about 600 miles north of Christchurch, the earthquake centre, so we haven't heard about it except in the news.
Okay, so that's good. So you're not having any types of effects or anything from the Japan deal, right?
No, we're very fortunate. It's been trouble-free. We've had a wonderful summer. We're now down into autumn or fall, and winter lies ahead, but it's all been good.
All right, to the listeners that are listening right now, Jonathan Gray, he's in New Zealand, and this is probably the furthest interview I have done since I've had this show since last year, and it's an honor to have you on the show. And so let's start from the beginning here, Mr. Gray. How about I kind of want to talk about the origins starting off. So how much correlation does your theory about the origins of man compare to Zecharia Sitchin's research and the ancient astronaut theory?
Oh, very, very different. Very different indeed. Archaeology produces no real evidence of extraterrestrial involvement in what man was able to achieve. Rather, the pattern of development that we have today is very, very similar in its thinking process to the pattern of development of the past. It looks like it's all very human, and the evidence continues to build in that direction.
Some researchers also believe that, I'm not going to name any names because I don't want to discredit them by no means, but some researchers believe that the origin of modern man is in South Africa, which many theorize that that's where Eden was, such as Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden. But many say that it's in South Africa, and we were made as a slave race to mine gold. What's your take on that?
My take on it is that's a mistake. The Middle East is the centre of civilization in the beginning, and the reason for me saying that is that Africa actually is just like New Zealand, Australia, South America, northeastern Asia. It's the furthest away from the evidence of beginnings. Now, if you look at the mountainous area of Turkey, Syria, Iran, that is the area from which everything changes in all directions progressively. Archaeology sees a gradual change as people stand out from one central spot. And if you take the clues of gradual change over the years and over a distance of travelling, it leads you back to one central spot in the Middle East. It doesn't lead you to Africa or anywhere else. When you compare the archaeological differences progressively, like a circle of rings going out in all directions from one spot.
What I would like to know is that about many theorize that humans came up about 8,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago. Some say 50,000 years ago. And Michael Cremo, who I had on last year, he believes that we've been here for several 100,000 years. What's your take on that, Mr. Gray?
Well, I'd like to state this, that the person who gained his Nobel Prize for his research on carbon dating, and carbon dating is what is used for human civilizations, Dr. Libby, he declared that you do hear these wild claims about civilizations going back 40,000 years and whatever, but he said we have no physical evidence of anything at all beyond the first dynasty of Egypt that gives us any reason to say that civilizations are any older. And that man was an expert in his field.
Yes, and I found an article today. I believe it was on. I think it was on Coast to Coast AM where I found it. It was has something to do. If I pull it up right here, I think it says. Give me one second here. It said that a 100,000-year-old civilization. I don't know if you read that or not. It's from FortuneTime.com. Have you read any of that? It's not really.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear what you said there. Would you mind repeating it, please, Mike?
Yeah, it's an article on FortuneTime.com. It's the title is 100,000-year-old civilization, and I read that. I think it was Friday. I read that, and it seems like it's always every month or two there's a new article out there that's trying to teach humans back older than. It's almost like they're speculating on our civilization, like this article says, 100,000 years.
Well, now, if somebody says they found something very old, of course, it gives them prestige. It's good for their ego, but it's not good for true science, because true science cannot go back. Carbon dating cannot date anything with certainty beyond about 3000 BC. That's an absolute fact. And anyone who goes to a laboratory and asks them to date an object will often be told that the laboratory cannot date it beyond a certain date. Anything else beyond that has to be speculation, which is just theory and not fact.
How come they are speculating on this? Because I actually agree with you, Mr. Gray. I believe that they don't have all their facts straight. It's almost like trying to push into society that we've been here a lot longer, or intelligent beings such as ourselves have been here a lot longer than we really believe, or really than what's brought to it in modern universities.
Yes. The reason for all this wild dating is simply because people have a mindset. At school, we have been taught that everything goes back millions of years, and of course, this is not so. There's no evidence whatsoever of this. The rocks of the earth with all the fossils show evidence of having been laid down very, very rapidly. And fossil evidence is the best evidence of our past. It shows not a slow layering of the Earth's surface over millions of years. What it shows is a rapid covering before an animal or a fish or a tree could decay. Today, very few fossils are being made because fossils require instant burial before bacteria can start breaking them up, before they can start decomposing. And it needs a certain amount of pressure on top and temperature for this to happen. But this is not how the natural world goes. It's evidence of catastrophe when we see fossils in the strata of the Earth. And the interesting thing is that sometimes, and very often, and this is all over the world, one single fossil will penetrate many, many different strata. For example, a tree. A tree can go through 13 or 14 different strata. Each strata is supposed to be millions of years older than the one on top of it. So goodness me, what happened to the tree while it was waiting all those millions of years to get buried? Was there no such thing as decay in those days? That's my question.
Yes, that's a pretty good one also. And I kind of want to go to, I kind of got two questions that's going to go back to back. And like for you to just, if you have to speculate, just speculate on your modern knowledge of your research, over the years that you've been doing. Okay, what date would you date the Neanderthal men compared to the modern day? When I say modern day, the modern day as in intelligent human beings.
That's a very, very good question. Well, Neanderthal, I've been studying this question for 42 years now, and I've challenged people to overthrow what we've discovered, and no one has yet succeeded to do so. We're finding that Neanderthal man, for example, he's named after a location where this particular skeleton was found, and a more modern research of this man has shown that he was not pre-human, he was not a primitive, he was simply an ordinary human being who lived round about between 2,000 and 3,000 BC, and who actually had suffered multiple sclerosis, and also he suffered from arthritis, and that's why he was stooped. Now, today, you could walk down the street of any city and you'll find modern men who look exactly like Neanderthal man was. But this is just one example was found and a big theory was made around it.
Yes, and if you speculate on about how many thousands of years ago, where does the Neanderthal race place?
Well, round about, I'd say closer to 2,000 BC, only 4,000 years ago. When we consider Neanderthal man, he was contemporary with cities and with people who lived in caves also, who had gone out of their civilized environment and were now living primitively. There are people like that today. I know one here in New Zealand who was a school teacher. Now he looks just like a Neanderthal man and sitting in a cave. In fact, he wasn't wearing any clothes until recently for several years, right here in New Zealand. That's the typical kind of man that Neanderthal was. And
I can agree with that. Like, it's pretty much where intelligence started within us. Homo sapiens was in cities where larger groups of people were, where they could share their collective knowledge and everything like that. And usually the primitive people were spread across the world. And what my question is, how come the human beings and the Neanderthal men were so spread across the world, and what sparked their intelligence within the human species?
Well, the evidence shows that man has not come up and become intelligent. He's gone down. And we have actually deteriorated over time. Our brain size has gone down. Our stature's gone down. Our length of life has decreased. The earliest men, as far back as we go archaeologically, were very intelligent, as intelligent as we are. There's no evidence of primitive men coming and gaining intelligence later. No evidence of a slow evolution to intelligence whatsoever. But rather it does show that man began at the top, not at the bottom, and that the history of civilization is not increase of intelligence, but rather deterioration, physically and mentally.
Yeah, Michael Cremo also, he has a new book, which is devolution, if I'm saying that correctly, devolution, which is, the human race is evolving or is devolving from higher state of consciousness and knowledge. And it's kind of crazy is that you would think that with all the technology that we have in the world, we, according to him and according to other researchers as yourself, we are devolving. I just don't understand, how are we devolving? I can say that we are devolving spiritually and consciously, but is that the only two factors that we are devolving in, or is it, what is it? Is it love, or what is it, Jonathan?
We are actually devolving on all fronts, actually. There's degeneration physically, which is very, very evident today. Today's generation worldwide is the least well of all generations that we have kept records. That says a lot, because with science able, or claiming to be able to keep us well and make us better, it's not succeeding. And this is the sickest generation. You can check that on virtually all countries of the globe.
Yes. And I kind of want to move forward a little bit to some of this ancient knowledge, such as, well, I say ancient knowledge, but I read on your site, and also I've listened to other interviews and other documentaries that talk about ancient nuclear war. Explain a little bit about that. Is that the one that's in the Bible about Sodom and Gomorrah, or is, because I also heard about ancient nuclear war in India, whether there nuclear war all over the world or just a certain points on the world? There are legends. First of all, there are legends about ancient nuclear war, and there are also physical remains that we can find today. It's very, very interesting that the Mexicans, starting with America, the Mexican people and the Indians of Canada both spoke of a nuclear, they didn't have the word nuclear, but they spoke of a war waged in the air, and where a missile could destroy and melt an entire city. Now, the Mexicans said it happened north of them. The Canadian Indians said it happened south of them. And if you go between Canada and Mexico, we're right here in the United States. And explorers have been finding in the Death Valley region interesting evidence of some remains that look as though they were parts of cities. And they have been burnt, melted from radiated heat above. That's very interesting. Yes.
Now, if we go down to India, there are records there that one city was given a warning by its enemies for the population to get out of the city, because in the next week, the week after, there's going to be one missile coming that's going to destroy and burn that city up. And people were given so much time to get out. Now, you can go to locations in India today. There's actually one in the northeastern area of India, in the jungle today, and you will find there radioactive ruins, and ruins which show that they have been melted, radiated heat from above. There's something similar in the Middle East, but there's two good examples, North America and India.
I did a little research because I'm trying to find this quote from the Mahabharata. And here it is. It's from the Mahabharata. Flying a swift and powerful Vimana, which is fast aircraft, I believe, hurled a single projectile, which could be a rocket, charged with the power of the universe. An incandescent column of smoke and flame, as bright as 1,000 suns, rose with all its splendor. It was an unknown weapon, an iron thunderbolt, a gigantic messenger of death, which reduced to ashes the entire race of the Vrishnis, is that how you say that? And
yeah, you did it right.
The corpses were so burned as to be unrecognizable. Hair and nails fell out. Pottery broke without apparent cause, and the birds turned white. After a few hours, all foodstuffs were infected. To escape from this fire, the soldiers threw themselves in streams to wash themselves and their equipment. How come that has been suppressed from the modern universities?
Well, yes, it's not popular. However, in India, there are some universities that have been studying this document, and I understand that there's one in the United States, I don't have its name, that have actually got the translation into English, and they have been researching it. There's no doubt at all that we've got here the evidences of what we would say is atomic radiation. In fact, it was found in the writings of India that people were only able to wash themselves clean by dipping into the water. Their hair fell out, their foodstuffs were spoiled. All of the indications of atomic radiation are described as we would know it today.
And I seriously doubt that they were writing some fiction there, you know. And I don't understand why this type of, why this, you know, this is just a little piece out of the Mahabharata. Why is it, I just don't understand why it's so suppressed, you know, because you would think maybe if it's being suppressed on purpose or not, I don't know. Is it because maybe it's not proven yet, like, for authenticity? Like, what is the authenticity of this quote out of the Mahabharata?
Well, I'm sorry to say this, but today the education system is in the hands of people who, you might say, have hijacked it so that they can push one theory to the exclusion of all others. And that theory is Darwin's evolution theory. And anything that will not measure up to that or actually contradicts that or threatens that is not allowed to be spoken of. You'll find that no other theory except the Darwinian theory of history is acceptable to the people that control the education establishment, unfortunately. They also control the scientific literature, so that if a scientist tries to speak up against it, he is shut out by a panel of his peers who will not let his work be published.
Part of this supposedly nuclear war that happened in the ancient past, could this be, I don't know, could this be a factor of your research and other researchers out there that talk about ancient underground tunnels? Because maybe
well, that's an interesting one. The underground tunnels are a very popular subject. In fact, underground tunnels are one of archaeology's best kept secrets. Yeah, that's one of the most interesting, Mike. These tunnels do exist, and we don't know for certain why they were built, but we do know that people through history have used them, they've gone underground in order to escape persecution or war. And it may very well be that tunnels were, when they had the technology to do it back there. A lot of these tunnels do show evidence of having been burnt smooth with no rubble left behind. Simply, it's almost like the rocks were melted into shape by something akin to what we would today call a laser beam, and you'll see these in different parts of the world inside the tunnel systems. And therefore, they had technology. Therefore, it would seem possible that these people were doing this in order to keep themselves safe from what was going on above ground. That is a very logical speculation, though it's only a speculation. We don't know for sure.
But of course, it's a speculation, but it does make sense because, well, what do we have nowadays? You know, we have, you know, VIPs and presidents and the rich. They all pretty much have bunkers to go to in case of some type of emergency or nuclear war. You know, and what is a bunker? You know, they go underground. Of course, you know, the ancients probably didn't make bunkers, but they could make, just like you call it, these underground tunnels. You know, and it's a very fascinating subject, and hopefully, you know, sometime in the near future, we will find out, you know, a little more about these underground tunnels and the link to maybe possibly these nuclear wars that was in the ancient past. But why does our ancient past seem to have so much war and turmoil?
Well, I believe it's man's selfishness. Most ordinary people, I think, don't want war. But once a person reaches the elements of power, as the saying goes, power can corrupt. And people with power want to hold on to it tenaciously, often. And if they find that they're getting great benefits, say financially and in other ways from their leadership, and they feel threatened by someone else, or they want more of what they've got, this is justification in the minds of many of such people to create war. It's unfortunate, but it's always happened. It's human nature. The only thing that can stop war is a deliberate change in human nature. Otherwise, it keeps on happening.
And I might be jumping on these questions a little bit because when I kind of listened to a few of your interviews and looked at it on your website, you are loaded with a lot of information. So I want to ask you about Hollow Earth theory, and why I'm asking you about the Hollow Earth theory, which is because, you know, I'm very fascinated about the ancient nuclear devastations that, you know, with all the evidence and everything, it might not be in the modern universities, all this evidence, but if you look at the material, it's there, you know, just like the Mahabharata, you know, that quote. And it makes me wonder, the Hollow Earth theory, like, could be any link to the nuclear war and devastation, the Hollow Earth theory?
Well, Hollow Earth theory has fascinated me for a number of years. The polar explorers, both in the north and the south of our planet, those who went south toward the South Pole and those who went toward the North Pole, have come back with some very interesting anomalies in their reports. One report being that as you go further north, it does not get colder, it gets warmer, as though there's a warm wind blowing from out of the Earth somewhere in the north. Also, that as you get a little closer to the North Pole, it's like you've gone inside the sides of a cup, and you're looking down rather than up. And some explorers, I think it was Nansen, was one explorer, Norwegian explorer Nansen, said that there was a spot where he reached where suddenly there were two suns in the sky, the regular sun plus another one that appeared. And he didn't know how to explain it, but other researchers have suggested that maybe there is a hollowness in our planet, and that in the centre of it is a burning ball of fire, such as a sun. And the evidence points to something that we cannot explain, and maybe a hollow Earth is the explanation for it. But there's a lot of other evidence too. For example, at a certain point north, birds, instead of flying south as winter approaches to warmer lands, they fly north. Now, why would they fly north as winter approaches unless they were going to some warmer spot? That's a rather interesting question.
And to the listeners, you might think the Hollow Earth theory, you might be very informed on the Hollow Earth theory, and you may think that it's very ludicrous, it's very crazy. But yes, it's very speculative on the research about Hollow Earth theory. But think about it, you know, it was also crazy to think that the Earth revolved around the sun too. You know, everybody used to think that this, you know, that's what you know, back then everybody thought that the Earth was flat. But who knows? Just like I stay optimistic about the future when it comes to archaeological evidence and other evidence from the scientific community out there, because I want to see more stuff coming to the floor. And how do you stay motivated, Mr. Gray, about all this information that comes in every day? Like, how do you stay motivated? Because some information is kind of ridiculous, but some is pretty good. And how do you absorb it all? And are you optimistic about our future?
Well, first of all, how do I stay motivated? Well, firstly, because archaeology and research is full of wondrous surprises. And it's almost if not every day, it's every week. It's a wow, wow, wow. You know, this is amazing. Never heard of this before. But of course, then you've got to check it out and see how relevant it is. Rather, not how relevant so much as how realistic it is and how true it is. And of course, this is where my research then goes further. but it's always full of surprises, and I love that part of it. That keeps me motivated. And what do I see as the future of the human race? Because human nature, on its own, I believe we were created. We were created intelligent, and we were created to have some kind of harmony with the creation that is around us, and a harmony with our Creator. And until man reaches that, and I believe this is happening with lots of individuals today, mankind as a whole has lost that connection. And there's not much hope until each person regains that connection. And that's the only hope, in my opinion, is to gain a connection back with our Creator, because He's the source of all wisdom. And if we imbibe the spirit of love and peace and fellowship, which Creator has put within us first of all, and which we sometimes lose, there's great hope for the world, but I'd say only through such power.
And you have a list of questions on your site, and people go to beforeus.com and they can just search all information that you have there, and there's a part where it's questions and answers. And one that I find very fascinating is the mysterious race from ancient Chinese that were the mysterious race. And explain that a little bit, Jonathan.
I just didn't catch part of your sentence there, Mike. If you just repeat that, please.
The ancient Chinese were that mysterious race.
I'm sorry, what was that again?
The ancient Chinese were that mysterious race. That's one of the questions that is on your site.
Oh, I see. What did I ask about the mysterious race? What is my question there?
Let me see here. I gotta pull it up. Your question is much what you describe of ancient technology as from some mysterious races, actually from ancient Chinese sailors. The top copy map of Piri race, it's how you pronounce that, they refer to, it's actually compiled from ancient Chinese maps, now in Beijing Museum, and not in some mysterious ancient culture.
Well, actually, the Chinese were among a group of people who, within 200 or 300 years after the Great Flood, I subscribe to the Great Flood as the great disaster that actually buried most of the Earth's fossils that we have today. And soon after that, the Chinese and others who migrated out from the Middle East within a few hundred years began mapping the whole world. And the Chinese actually mapped the whole of North America, Mike. They described every mountain, every river. They described the wildlife. They gave measurements from one mountain to another, from one river to another. They described a sunrise over the Grand Canyon. They described seals frolicking on San Francisco Bay. They really gave a road map which you could use today quite well. If you translated that into English, you could use it very well and find your way all over the United States and Canada. That's how accurate it was. And others went down to places like Antarctica. But in fact, they went all over the world and they mapped the whole world. And their maps actually show evidence that they knew the Earth was round, and they knew where to position everything on a map in the sense of longitude and latitude, which is a very new discovery, recently new. So these people had all it took to map a world as accurately as we do today, and some modern maps have been corrected by comparing them with the ancient. And this is interesting. It's happened up in Canada and Greenland and Antarctica, where modern maps have had to be corrected as new discoveries have come from the old maps.
I listened to some female researcher on Coast to Coast AM a while back, a few years ago, and her research, I forgot her name, I wish I could remember, but her research was about ancient maps, and that's pretty much was her primary focus. And she believed that the Chinese were possibly one of the first to explore America other than Columbus?
Yes, I think probably America was first explored by the Chinese. The Chinese record we have is a very, very good one.
And I just thought that was very phenomenal, and how the very few like to control the information that's being passed around in the world, and they want to believe that a white man, such as Columbus, explored America. It's kind of crazy how information gets suppressed like that.
Oh, it is crazy. The same thing's happening on this side of the world too, Mike. Over in Australia and New Zealand, there's evidence that white man was not the first here. Captain Cook, 1769, is usually attributed with the mapping of New Zealand and also of Australia. But a friend of mine up in Queensland, which is the northern state of Australia, has for the last 20 years been excavating ruins which have proven to be Phoenician, going back to about 3,000 years ago. And his discoveries were so interesting that the Australian Broadcasting Corporation put him on the 6 o'clock news, prime time news, all across Australia. Well, straight after that, one of the local universities was upset about this exposure, and they sent an archaeologist up to the location, which is a little town of Serena, a sugar-growing town in North Queensland, and they gave him instructions to go up there, then come back and report to Australia that this was nonsense and that there was nothing there, which he did. After all, his pay packet was very important to him. His career was at stake. And that's what's been happening on this side of the world.
Fascinating. And since we're on this topic of exploring right now, I want to go a little bit to ancient Egypt, I believe, in the Mesopotamia area. I'm not sure if you are familiar with the tablet that has the solar system on the very top left corner, and it has the sun in the center, and it has the 9 planets around. Are you familiar with that tablet, Jonathan?
Oh, I'm familiar with this tablet, and it's in the Berlin Museum.
I don't understand
this tablet has been misinterpreted.
How did they know that?
Well, actually, the particular tablet you speak of, Mike, it does not show the things that have been claimed for it. I have a copy of the tablet here, and I even contacted the gentleman who was first publicising this and giving this theory out as fact, and he was unable to answer my questions. The tablet actually has nothing to do with the solar system. It's a religious tablet which in which worshippers are worshipping with corn. They're offering corn offerings to a god. Now, those so-called planets are not planets at all. They're part of a worship service, and I've documented this in a new book I've just put out, and this book is now available on my website.
Well, what about the tablet? I forgot the name of it. The tablet that people say that they're a helicopter and a submarine.
Yeah, those things are real.
Okay, explain a little more about that, Jonathan, because I don't understand how the ancients knew, or what were they seeing? Were they having vision of the future, or were they experiencing the now back then, and they were recording everything that they saw on tablet?
Well, the Egyptians actually made models of the things that they themselves used. They never made a model or a toy of anything that was not in use in real life. Now, in many of the tombs of Egypt, there were buried models of aircraft. These have been replicated and they fly. At first, when they were found, they were thought to be crude models of birds. But when an aeronautical expert from England went across to the Cairo Museum, and then he went up the Nile Valley into the Valley of the Kings, and he did a lot of research on this, and he said, I'm convinced that these are ancient flying machines being replicated. And he went back to England and he raised money for making a life-size model which could fly. And it seems evident that the laws of aeronautics and the ability to fly was known to the Egyptians. Likewise to the people of the Americas in the early times, and Central America in particular, models have been found also, and copies of them have been made to fly, so that they do have the ability to fly under the once they're constructed by the people who know what they're doing.
What sparked all this technology?
And the tomb of Tutankhamun is actually a whole set of drawings on how to construct a flying machine.
What sparked all this technology within the human race? Was it a certain group of beings or enlightened ones who you say that it was all human beings who that we weren't visited by anybody? So in your research, who was it that? Because obviously somebody had to stand out amongst the few to help guide the civilization into a more intelligent race, because it seems like our ancient past was very, very technological advanced back then.
Yes, absolutely. Well, now when we see the southern appearance of Egypt and the Indus Valley, which is now in Pakistan, and also Sumeria, which is in Iraq, those three locations in particular, it's interesting that they all sprang up round about the same time, and they did none of them shows evidence of a slow, gradual development to their peak, but rather the very earliest Egyptians and the very earliest Sumerians and the very earliest Indus Valley people all show evidence of having the knowledge and the ability to put it into practice at the very beginning of their history. Now, this does suggest a common origin, especially since they all arose about the same time as each other, within the same century. Now, we asked the ancient Egyptians where they got their knowledge from, and you can ask some of these ancient civilizations about their ancestors and their history, and they all point us back to a one-world disaster which we today call the Great Flood, which wiped out an advanced civilization. But the survivors were able to preserve a great amount of the knowledge that was wiped out with the disaster, and they were able to bequeath it to their descendants as they began to spread out and increase in numbers sufficiently to support a new culture. And we asked the ancient races where they got it from. They say it was the civilization wiped out before the Great Flood, and we are carrying on that civilization on not such a great scale, but on a reduced scale.
Could that main civilization that had all that technology be Atlantis?
The civilization had it before the Great Disaster, and before the Great Flood, there's a man who stands out, whose name has gone down. In fact, the book of Genesis speaks of him. His name was Tubal-Cain, and it speaks of him as having lived about 300 years before the disaster, and having been teaching others how to use metallurgy. He himself was an expert in metallurgy, and he was teaching others, which means there were schools of metallurgy. Now, that was about 300 years before the Great Disaster. It's interesting, Mike, that if we look back 300 years before our time, that's when our Industrial Revolution began in the West. So it's taken us roughly the same length of time to get where we are today as to where they were before their civilization was wiped out. It's an uncanny parallel.
And about Atlantis, I know you're probably going to speculate, but according to your research and your beliefs, where do you believe Atlantis was located?
Well, Atlantis actually, where there's a legend, there's always a core of truth. And I do believe that Atlantis is speaking of a past civilization, no question about that. Now, there are some similarities between what we know about Atlantis and what the old records speak of the world before the flood. And it's possible that Atlantis may be a corrupted memory of the world that was wiped out at that time. However, I'm also open to the suggestion that Atlantis could have been one of the post-flood civilizations that went under the ocean as a result of the settling down process that followed the Great Disaster. Now, the Great Flood was not just rain and water slowly rising. It was continents and seas churned up together. There was a disruption of the Earth's crust. There were cracks opened up in the Earth's crust. And outbelched not only water, but volcanic substance, and the whole Earth was in turmoil during a period of a year or more. But the centuries after that, there were great readjustments and settling down of the crust that had now been out of equilibrium. And this caused mountains to rise suddenly, land areas to sink, and Atlantis may very well have been one of these. Now, an interesting thing about the dating of Atlantis is that we do get the Atlantis story, unfortunately, fourth hand. It was given from an Egyptian to a Greek, and then to another Greek, his son, and then that's where we get it. And in that time, things can become a little garbled. And what comes down to us as 9,000 years before the Atlantis story was told by the Egyptian priests to the Greek, the names 1,000, rather the numeric value of 1,000, and is very similar to what we have here in English language between America and Britain. A billion in England is a million times a million. In America, it's 1,000 times a million. And so you take away 1 0, it makes all the difference if you're looking at the Atlantis story. And it seems very likely to me that that's what actually happened with the Atlantis story, that it was happened 900 years before the event was related later, not 9,000 years after.
How much truth is in the visions of Edgar Cayce on Atlantis?
Well, of course, there's lots of lost cities and lost civilizations under the sea. And if he believes that there was one under the sea in the Bermuda area, I'm not going to dispute that, because remains have been found down there, quite likely. But whether that's Atlantis, I don't think anyone can determine. There's more evidence probably that Atlantis was further east, if it was post-flood.
Another theory is that Antarctica could be once Atlantis, because as Edgar Cayce theorized, or in his visions, that the land under the sea, and most of Antarctica, or the whole continent, is under the sea and as a blanket of ice.
Yes, well, the sea level has risen up to 500 feet in the last 4,500 years. There are several hundred cities around the coastlines of our world, on all continents virtually. Well, let me say that, I'll correct that. Off the coast of Africa, Asia, Europe and America, and South America, there are cities under the sea, close to the coastlines. And there's evidence that land has risen, land has sunk, and also that the sea itself has risen about 500 feet over the centuries.
That's incredible, and Antarctica has always fascinated me, because according to your research, you believe that Antarctica used to flourish a civilization, and of course the Nazi Germany, they had a very kind of fascination with Antarctica. Many theorize that they had bases in Antarctica. What's the big story about Antarctica? According to your research, I know a little bit about that you believe that they had civilizations there in the ancient past, but when was that civilization there? And why is there so much interest in Antarctica?
This would have been, I would put this around about 2000 BC. The crustal adjustments of the Earth took place over a matter of a few centuries, and there is a theory also that the Earth has expanded, that the attraction inside the atoms of the surface of the Earth has weakened, and this would cause every atom to expand, and this would have actually produced an effect similar to, I don't know if you had this show in America a few years ago, The Incredible Hulk, where a man suddenly expanded and his shirt tore in half.
Yeah.
A Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, program. Well, the Earth there seems to be evidence that the Earth has undergone such a change. And when we consider that there was a great disaster about 4,500 years ago, in which we have our present star strata largely laid down, if you look at the sea bottom, there is no such strata. It's absent. Now, if all the seabeds that we have today were exposed during the Great Disaster, they should also, especially since they're lower, they should also show evidence of all these thousands of feet thick of strata, but they don't have such stratification. They appear to be very new, and the strata is only on the continents above the sea, which, according to the laws of physics, is impossible, because if you have a great flood, for example, stratification and deposition of soil and earth will take place evenly. It won't be absent from the lower areas and only found on the higher areas, which is the land. And this does suggest that the people who propose an expanding Earth model have a good point, that the expansion has occurred since the Great Disaster, and that the continents were at one time all together, but this was a very sudden breakup and not a gradual continental drifting. And this would have then isolated Antarctica and put it down toward the polar area and caused a sudden freeze.
According to the expanding Earth model, where was the continent of Antarctica according to the other continents?
It would have been closer to the equator at that time.
Okay. That's very fascinating, and it could it. I know it's very speculative, but back again to Atlantis. Do you believe that Antarctica could very possibly be Atlantis?
Well, that's an interesting theory, and of course, it's speculative, as you say.
Kind of running up to the top of the
hour. There are many other
hour.
Contenders.
Yes.
Yeah, Antarctica could be one of a number of different contenders, all of which are speculative.
And we're kind of running to the top of the hour, to the end of the show, Mr. Gray. And out of all your research and studies, we got about 3.5 minutes left. Out of all your research and studies, which stands out and fascinates you the most?
Two things. One is the tunnel systems of the Earth, and one is some excavations we've been doing on the seabed of the Red Sea, where we've been finding the remains of chariots, chariot wheels detached from the chariots, horses, horse skeletons, skeletal remains of men, all scattered right across the seabed on an underwater bridge which goes from Egypt across to Saudi Arabia. And one part of the one wheel was brought up and taken to the Egyptian Antiquities Department, and Dr. Ali Hassan was asked to date it, and he said undoubtedly 1500 BC area, which agrees with the Exodus. A very interesting coincidence, if you can call it that.
Well, Mr. Gray, it's been a very fascinating hour, and in the near future, I would love to have you and David Hatcher Childress on this show to talk about ancient technology a little more in depth. I believe some of my listeners and people on my website that they want you and David Hatcher Childress to be on my show with a longer program than an hour, and hopefully we can get that together sometimes in the future.
Yes, well, that may be possible, Mike. It's really been a pleasure talking with you today. Thank you.
And tell people where your website and where can they buy your books from.
Our website is beforeus.com, BEFOREUS.com, and at the bottom of the page there's a link which says other products. They're all open at the bottom there.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jonathan Gray, and it's been a privilege to talk with you finally, and you have a good evening, sir.
Thank you, Mike. It's been a real joy also.
All right,
bye-bye.
Yeah, good night. Bye. All right, that was Jonathan Gray from beforeus.com. go check out his work there, and his research is very phenomenal. I had another guest that was supposed to be coming on tonight after Jonathan Gray. It's supposed to be a little split deal for an hour and a half, but he can make it. So he's gonna come on another time, another show. But schedule him for next month. But I hope everybody enjoyed this show, and I apologize for the inconvenience in the beginning of the show. I've been having some kind of computer difficulties, but I believe I got them fixed. But I hope. I try to stay optimistic. But you can go to theufobunker.com. Yes, it's theufobunker.com. It's not just a UFO site. And I'm about to change the domain of that to probably thecrypticbunker.com, because it's more of a collage of cryptic things, more hidden things, occult things, sinister, anything that's hidden from the modern universities and things like that. Because you believe, a lot of people say, oh, you got a UFO site, so you are into UFOs. Yes, I'm into UFOs, but not like I used to. We all kind of start off something. I started off into this field and this research I'm in. The first thing was the UFOs. That's when I was a little kid, about 19 years old. Had a fascination with UFOs. My grandfather kind of brought the topic along with me. We used to sit at home during the summertime on my summer break, and we'd watch UFO documentaries and things like that. And that's pretty much got me. That was the starting point in this long road that I'm on right now. And now I'm into deeper things, because UFO is just one little piece of the puzzle. It's not the whole puzzle. That's why I'm going to change the domain name to thecrypticbunker.com. I'll be doing that sometimes this week. But everybody, it's been a privilege, it's been an honor. Until next time, stay tuned.